Welcome to Nonsense Season 3, Episode 49, our big story and our second show of the week. I'm Jeff Parker.
I'm Skittle.
This time we're looking at the unheard conversations that won the Cold War. Up next.
I mean, like the ones that we seeded, the ones that we got onto their wires and just like whispered, Canadian hockey players are the best hockey players ever. And then just let them fight it out.
And then they just started fighting.
Totally. I think that's how it worked. You just created a whole bunch of infighting.
Totally saturated their bandwidth on their secret phone lines so that they couldn't actually
100%.
Communicate important things. Yeah, sure.
And then they just went for it for the next 30 years. Fight me.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
As it turns out, this whole spying thing isn't that hard. You just got to find out what resonates with them.
At one point, we even went and repaired their secret cable so they could continue their fights on hockey.
Totally. It seems to be settling down. Let's re-encourage their vigor about the Swedish team is pretty good too. And they're like, son of a... And they just went, and then, yeah.
30 years later, they're still at it.
That's literally how we got the wall torn down, is they were too busy fighting over Swedish versus Canadian hockey players.
Okay, the audacious undersea spying that tapped into the phones of the USSR. Let's go.
Do we have to tell the truth now? All right, let's tell the real story, I guess.
As the world watches the conflict in Ukraine, a different kind of war, one fought with signals, codes, and covert operations, is unfolding in the digital and physical shadows. The principles of modern electronic warfare and intelligence gathering echo a hidden history of espionage. Beneath the veneer of Cold War diplomacy and military posturing, a secret war of wits and technology also unfolded in the shadows. This was a world where a seemingly innocent wooden carving, a gift to a U.S. ambassador, concealed a passive listening device known as the Great Seal Bug. Its discovery revealing an audacious Soviet espionage plot.
You should be suspect of any wood carvings that someone gives you. Any.
Trojan horse much?
I don't care if it's like your best friend. If you get a wood carving, you should be suspicious.
Don't hang it over your desk when you're having your super secret conversations.
Unless it was given to you by the Russians. And then in which case you should absolutely hang it up.
Put it right out.
Wherever you do all your banking conversations.
But an underwater game of cat and mouse was far more complex. Half a world away in the frigid depths of the Sea of Okhotsk, U.S. Navy submarines engaged in Operation Ivy Bells, a mission so classified its very existence was a secret even to most of the naval men on board. They weren't hunting submarines, they were tapping a Soviet undersea communications cable, intercepting top secret military transmissions. These two stories, one of a clever passive bug and the other of a high-tech undersea wiretap, illustrate the ingenuity, risk, and profound secrecy that defined the intelligence battles of the Cold War.
Oh, this sounds super interesting, but I did all my research on Operation Ivy Balls, so
that's going to be a very different show.
I'm concerned that I'm going to have different answers for the questions that you're going to ask, and maybe, we'll just see what happens.
First of all, the term Ivy Bells, let's talk about where that comes from. Ivy was this common prefix for highly sensitive top secret projects, was used a lot. And Bells was a term that was commonly used to refer to wiretap.
I think that's where it came from. Yeah. That sounds about right to me. Ivy Bells is super interesting, but I think you got to start with the Great Seal, or what?
Yes. The Trojan horse,
affectionately as, I'm not making this up, quote, the thing. We just call it the thing. Like we ran out of other names for it, and we're just like, we're going to call it the thing, and then now that's used forever.
It was a gift from the Russians to our American embassy in Russia. Put this over your desk. Here's a lovely carving.
I'm okay. When you say it that way, it sounds like you're telling a joke.
Right?
However, no, that is exactly what happened. They literally had, by the way, pictures of this great seal, they're really nice. It looked really,
it's
really
a lovely
nice.
carving.
It's a lovely carving, and it's got the eagle on it with our coat of arms. Like, it's this really beautiful thing. And
we probably wouldn't have put it up had it not been nice.
Yes, it was given as a gift. I think it was like in 1945 to the United States ambassador to the Soviet Union. It was a gift from the Soviet Union. And that person, the ambassador, I think it was Avril Harriman, received it and said, "This is very nice. I'm going to put it over my desk," which is where it hung. Which makes perfect sense.
Where I make my top secret phone calls.
Now, okay, it's 1945. We're the Russians' friends. Everyone's getting along. We just kept, some version of freedom alive. We stopped the Nazis. It's good times. Hey, thanks for the seal.
Oh, what a nice thing. I'm going to hang above my desk.
Yeah. Turns out the seal, the gift that just keeps on giving is what that thing was.
Okay, backtrack. Let's talk about the technology of what's in the seal. Obviously, this is a bug.
Yeah.
They're listening into what is being said at the U.S. Embassy. How technologically does this work? At the time, you couldn't when you hang the seal on your office, what you really need to also do is plug it in. Yeah. There's none of that. So how does this thing technologically work?
And of course, the Americans were like, oh, it's USB-A. Come on. Why can't it be USB-C? This thing doesn't have a thread radio on it. I mean, I got to believe, even in 1945, if you handed a seal to the Russian ambassador and it had a plug on it, I think that would have raised a couple eyebrows. Or like it was a clock and they're like, change the batteries every couple of years. It'll be fine. Also, point this antenna towards the window if you don't mind. That would also be great.
So how did this thing work? It has no batteries, yet it can transmit communications. It can overhear what's happening in the room.
So I believe this is pretty much the first time we've seen something like this in the wild. It wasn't known that these existed. This is a whole new sort of thing. And it was a what they call a passive cavity resonator. So it had a little tiny itty bitty bit of electronics in it, and you can barely call it electronics. There really wasn't much to it.
Yeah.
But it didn't do anything unless you powered it. And the way you powered it was with what they call an instead of saying powering, they would call it illuminating.
Yeah.
You would illuminate this thing with a very specific radio frequency, which would then sort of turn it on or power it.
You'd blast radio waves at this thing and it would cause a reaction to the radio waves.
So you would effectively power it up, and then it would, there's a very thin membrane, and your sound waves are moving the air. It would be enough to strike this membrane and then cause a difference in what I believe was the frequency of the frequency of the radio wave that it was receiving and then sort of retransmitting, I think is how that works.
It was both AM and FM. There was both amplitude modulation and frequency modulation.
Oh, so you could get the good music shows and the news shows at the same time.
You get the high quality version of the conversation, and you could get the one you could receive everywhere.
Far away. The condenser mic was effectively giving you that amplitude modulation with parasitic frequency modulation for the re-radiated signal, because it had to take the signal in. Remember, it had an illuminated frequency that would power it and then reflect something back. I think the total weight of the unit, including the antenna, was about an ounce. It was 31 grams.
And there were tiny little holes in the Great Seal that they had drilled in where
that is debated.
The membrane was so that you could get the sound waves in.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of debate over whether there were tiny holes or they were just very, very thin wood. Like the wood was carved out so it was very thin and sound could still pass through it. I don't know that we actually know either way. But the point is, you were getting enough movement of air through it to strike the membrane.
Yeah.
And this membrane was so frail that when we were inspecting it, we actually destroyed it and had to repair it to make the thing still work, which is kind of nuts.
To test it out, right?
This device was hidden inside the seal, and then the Americans very smartly hung it on the wall.
Where it hung not for a year, not for 2 years, not for 5 years.
No, this is not the best look ever for us. It's actually still there. No, it's been there. Like we want to take it down. It's beautiful. Look at it. It's got the eagle on it holding snakes. No, it was there for like 7 years, 6 or 7 years. The thing was up until we figured it out. And by the way we figured it out is even more insane.
We didn't figure it out.
We didn't
Somebody
figure it
else
out.
figured it out.
And to be
for
clear,
us.
it's not like we didn't sweep the room, right? We swept the room. We looked for stuff that had batteries on it. Like we weren't complete and utter idiots.
Well,
but this thing, there was no way at the time that we knew how to detect it unless it was powered up. So if it wasn't powered up, you wouldn't know that it was there transmitting.
Must not be a bug in here.
So if I understand the story correctly, there was like a British audio engineer. It was like a British radio operator, and he was at the British embassy. He overheard American conversations on an open Soviet Air Force radio channel.
Who are these American voices?
And he was like, wait a minute. Why am I hearing Americans talk on this Soviet Air Force channel?
He was blasting radio waves right at the right frequency to make this thing operate.
This was just right place, right time, listening to the right thing. The Brits told the Americans, and then a State Department employee was able to then reproduce results with, I think he used like an untuned wideband receiver with a simple diode detector and it's kind of similar to like a field strength meter. And I was able to figure this out. So this is like around 1951. Remember, we were given it in 45.
Yeah.
And then in 51, we sort of figured this thing out. And then we sent in some State Department employees to investigate it and other suspected bugs that were in not just our embassy, but also the British and Canadian embassy.
Well, no, first we didn't even know.
We didn't know where it was.
We knew the room was bugged. We didn't know where the bug was. How come nobody said, well, how about the Great Seals the Russian gave us? How obvious can this be?
No. Tom brought that with him. His kid made that. He's really good. He's in woodshop.
They had to figure out which object in the room was the bug. They couldn't find it for a while.
Okay, so that's what's nuts. They knew that they could get this to happen if they powered it, but they had to power it. So they swept the room after using a signal generator. So they had a signal generator and a receiver to understand where it was, right? They would get this like audio feedback if it was transmitted on the same frequency.
Yeah.
So this is the sweep they had to do to find this device implanted inside the Great Seal.
And then for years, they didn't disclose the fact that they had found this thing. Which I think is kind of cool because you want to put on radio shows for the Russians.
I'm presuming.
Tell them things that you're just making up.
I'm presuming that's part of why they repaired it, right? Like if you know that someone's listening to you, but they don't know that you know, that's fantastic. Now you can just seed other information.
We're going to have great fun in this office.
Yeah, right? And like so now you're basically in like the very first version of reality TV. Like they think it's real, but it's actually scripted. The whole thing's scripted. And that's what I think we saw, or that's what I presume we saw from the early 50s until I think it was 1960 when we ended up, the Americans ended up using this as a bit of posturing. I think this was right after the 1960 U-2 incident where a U.S. spy plane had entered Russian territory and was shot down.
Yeah.
And it was the U.S. ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. that showed off the bugging device to illustrate that spying incidents between both Russia or between the USSR and the U.S. were mutual. And like we've been doing this
and had been going
years.
on for a long time.
Yeah.
He showed this at the UN. Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty fantastic. The presumption was that the Soviets wanted to abort the 1960 Paris summit, and good old Henry was like, "No, like look, we've been doing this to each other for a long time. This is nothing new," and brought the Great Seal out.
Check this out.
Like, could you imagine like the Russian ambassador, like when he sees it coming, oh no, they figured it out. Like, took you guys a while, didn't it? I wonder.
What
I do wonder
took
how that
so long?
Yeah, exactly. Like, did they laugh at him? Now, I also love if the Russian ambassador, I think it was Nikita Khrushchev, if he was like, "Oh, good job, you found 1 of 6," and then just sat back and laughed.
Where's the other ones?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you found that one. Oh, wow, good work.
But then the U.S. did their own bit of spying, and this is really kind of a nifty piece of technology that happened in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's be clear. We are skipping a whole lot of spying on both sides. There have been some fascinating things that have happened, which perhaps we'll get to in a future episode. I wanted to bring up that Great Seal because, to me, when I think of Soviets and Americans spying on one another, I don't think you can have a conversation without bringing up the Great Seal, because that is pretty remarkable.
Just great.
And it kind of set the table. Now, flash forward 20-ish years later, 25 years later, we as the Americans have figured out that there is this really interesting naval base, and we're pretty sure that the naval base is connected to another base on sort of the mainland, on a peninsula.
Across water. Big cable.
And our presumption is that there's a big cable that goes between them. Now, that cable is in a bay that is, on 270 degrees of this bay.
It's Soviet waters. The bay is Soviet waters, which made the mission even more dangerous.
And the Soviets had kept it strictly off limits for foreign vessels. So they installed a network of sound detection devices along the seabed to detect intruders. They also carried out numerous surface and subsurface naval exercises. This was not a place you could just strut into.
Yeah.
However, we got the idea. We said, hey, if we can find that cable, we can probably build something to put on it to listen to it. We can probably get some intelligence out of it, because that was the name of the game then, right? Like we didn't know what they had been building. They had ICBMs. Those looked like they had other supersonic missiles. They had planes we didn't know about. There's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't know about. And we felt like any shred of intelligence would be helpful. And we thought this could potentially be a treasure trove. Even though there were all these obstacles, right? You had listening devices. You had them doing all these naval exercises. This is clearly Soviet water. You can't be like, oh no, we just were out in the open screwing around. The U.S. still thought this was worth pursuing, right? They thought that there was a decent enough chance to at least try to give this the good college try. Yeah.
You could listen in.
And it was Captain James Bradley that conceived of the mission and firmly believed that he could find this tiny Soviet cable under the ocean.
Have you seen pictures of it? It's not that tiny.
It's like 5 inches around. It's not that big.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Well, yeah, okay, sure, on your basement floor, but in the scope of the
ocean, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Soviets, like, you didn't just call them up and use an accent and say, hey, by the way, where's the cable? And then they tell you. And this part really breaks my brain. Bradley remembered, this is a captain in the Navy, right? So you got to presume this person's been around boats most of his life.
Yeah.
And he remembered seeing signs during his childhood along the Mississippi River that warned boaters not to anchor near cables.
Don't drag your anchor here, you'll break the cable.
And he rationalized that the Soviets would use similar signs and lead him right to his target, which at first blush, I'm like, no, they wouldn't.
That sounds ridiculous. A military cable, you're going to mark it out.
It's like in their backyard pool. Like, this is water that is clearly there, so it kind of does make sense. And as it turned out, he was correct.
They had signs.
So when he went on the USS Halibut, they located a series of these signs in the northern part of the sea after a bit of a search. So I'm assuming these guys were going around, like just going up periscope depth and just looking at them. Oh, there's a buoy, there's a sign.
Yep.
And then once you sort of find the sign, you dig around that area and you find the cable. And they actually did
Little
it.
signs that said, "Do not anchor here. You'll break our super secret cable." But it was written in Russian, so we had no idea what any of it meant.
It said Stalin super secret cable. Do not anchor here. So they find the cable. They're at about 400 feet of depth. So they're not like insanely deep, but they're also pretty damn
But
deep.
you can't scuba dive there.
No, you're not free diving in 400 feet, just screwing around with your swim trunks on. And while we were pretty confident we could have divers work at that depth, the water was insanely cold.
Yeah.
So the first time they went out, they actually had to retreat into the sub. And the solution they came up with was the form of a cord that would pump warm water into their dive suits, which somehow...
So they wouldn't freeze to death.
Yeah, so they wouldn't, because you don't want them to freeze to death. You'd like them to actually live.
Get the job done.
What is the device? It is this 20-foot long device that wrapped around the cable without piercing it. So it didn't change the cable at all, and it didn't pierce the casing of the cable.
Because you can't cause a short and then magically the cable starts working again.
Totally. They would see this. We presume they would see it. Unclear whether or not they would or not.
Right.
But then it would record all communications made over it. And they supposedly even had some mechanism so that if the cable were to be raised for repair, the recording device would detach.
Would just let go.
So that it wouldn't be found. I'm really curious to how they did that. Maybe like a pressure sensor or something like that. And if it started to come up in the water, it would drop off.
Couple things we got super lucky on.
Yeah.
First of all, the conversations were not encrypted. They were just plain in Russian, so anyone could listen in. Otherwise, this whole operation would have been for naught.
We had decryption capabilities. It would have just been a lot harder. But the Soviets were so confident that this cable wouldn't be tapped that they were like, we'll just put it all out in plain text, which I can see they're thinking. Still a terrible idea.
In waters that guarded, sure.
But I can see they're thinking. Yeah. So, and this is what you're doing basically when you send a text message to anybody.
An SMS text.
If it's not,
everybody's seeing it.
We also had a cover story for this because remember, we had to divert funds from this like deep submergence rescue vehicle program. Like that's how we got funds to pay for it.
Right.
And then we modified these subs that were supposed to be rescue vehicles,
the Halibut,
with fake simulators attached to them so we could hide all the stuff for the divers. So they were actually diver lockouts. And then we had to create another cover story for the sailors because most of the sailors on the boat didn't even know what they were doing on the sub.
Couldn't tell them.
You couldn't tell them. It wasn't worth the risk. So the cover story, again, this is our internal cover story that we were going in to recover parts of this Soviet SSN-12 sandbox. This was a supersonic anti-ship missile, and we wanted to go retrieve debris so that countermeasures could be developed. Like that was the cover story, right? What is insane to me about this is that they ended up succeeding on the cover story. They recovered all of the debris from this anti-ship missile, with the largest debris being no larger than 6 inches and a total of more than 2 million pieces. I find that insane how they got that many pieces back.
And they also learned things from the pieces that they recovered.
Oh yeah, they were able to reverse engineer it and then determined that it was guided only by radar and not infrared guidance, which we previously suspected. They achieved both, like the secret mission that they were there for and also this cover mission that was still pretty beneficial.
Okay, so the data can't be transmitted back to us. First of all, they have to have rebreathers and things when the divers go down to this thing. They can't just have oxygen because they're under so much pressure. They have to be breathing some special mixture of gases. Tell me about that. But also, I want to know, how did they even get out of the submarine and down to it? And how did they connect the device with no bubbles coming to the surface where Russians could see what was going on? I mean, they had to be super stealthy.
I mean, they had this sub with a diver lockout on it so they could get out to it. I think at the time they had already figured out how to do these nitrox mixes. That's not what this was. I think this was actually a helium mix, which it's unclear how much we were doing this before. I don't think this was the first mission. They seemed to get it out way too fast.
No, there was naval training for this.
Yeah, but it was still relatively new.
These weren't Navy SEALs. This was a different thing.
It's really pretty crazy to me that we were using a lot of this cutting edge tech in order to get this done, right? Deploying divers out of the bottom of a sub.
They would communicate by voice. They had mics in their headsets. Part of the mixture was helium.
Sure.
So their voices were super, super high. They had to have on the receiving side a way to lower their voices back down so they could make out what they were saying.
They didn't just call each other Simon and Theodore?
No.
That seemed like an easier path. I mean, again, there was so much tech just to be able to get to the thing, not to mention the 20-foot long recording device that you strap onto the cable and somehow gets all your conversations from, multiple pairs of of cables on this thing. Like, this was not a trivial thing.
Yeah.
And it recorded all to tape. I'm assuming magnetic tape. I couldn't find confirmation of that, but I don't know what other, I don't think they'd be punching it onto punch tape.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure this is all recorded on magnetic tape, and they had to go back and get those tapes.
Every month they had to go pick up the tapes.
I mean,
so your intelligence was always a month old.
Yes.
You had to go into ice cold Russian waters in a submarine and retrieve the tapes.
As it turned out, fortunately, it wasn't all just them talking about hockey. We actually got traffic between like senior Soviet officials that gave invaluable information on naval operations, their Pacific fleets, primary nuclear submarine base. All sorts of interesting stuff came out of this. This was not a waste of time. This was a very valuable asset for us to have. So valuable that we ended up deploying more on other Soviet lines in other parts of the world. And I think even more advanced instruments were built by AT&T Bell Labs that used radioisotope thermoelectric generator power and could store a year's worth of data. So they kept creeping up the ability on these things over time, and then retrofitted several submarines for the ability to do this. So we had all of this stuff deployed. I can't imagine how many man hours, forget about dollars, just man hours went into this thing. It had to be a large number. You think about the design, you think about the building of the devices, the execution, the planning, all of this stuff.
Go back to the submarine. They had to refit the submarine so that it could hover in place.
Yeah.
And also so it could move laterally instead of just back and forth.
And get guys in and out of it.
Yeah.
You know what you typically don't want in your submarine?
A hole.
Holes. Yeah. That's typically bad. I'm no sub-design expert, but that doesn't sound great to me. So we figure all of this stuff out. We get these things, we get the first one installed in the early 70s. Great. These things would still be installed likely today. No one would know about them, or at least we would have probably decommed them and not told anybody, were it not for one dude.
It weren't for a guy in debt.
So in this particular case, there was a gentleman named Ronald Pelton, and he was a 44-year-old veteran of the NSA. He was fluent in Russian. He had worked for the NSA for years. He had been fired, or at least let go from the NSA. At the time of the compromise, he was somewhere around $65,000 in debt. That's about $250,000 by today's standards. And he had filed for personal bankruptcy just 3 months before he resigned. So he was in a bad place. Mm-hmm. He was from Michigan, actually. I think Benton Harbor, Michigan, which I think is interesting. He had only a couple $100 in the bank. He walked into the Soviet embassy in DC in January of 1980 and offered to sell what he knew to the KGB for money. And that is kind of ballsy, because how does a veteran of the NSA not know that we're watching the embassy?
Sure.
We know when you walk in, you idiot.
That's not how we caught him.
No, we ended up catching him from a tip later on, which is another fascinating story. Our understanding is that no documents were passed from Pelton to the Soviets because he had an extremely good memory, as you had mentioned. He reportedly received about $35,000 from the KGB for intelligence he provided from 1980 to 1983. Now, for intelligence on the Operation Ivy Bells, the thing we're talking about here, the KGB gave him $5,000.
This is absolute steal.
They basically gave him no money for this program that we had spent at least millions of dollars on, if not tens of millions of dollars in 1970s, 1980s money. Mm-hmm. And then even kind of more insane, I don't know, the Soviets just didn't believe him or just wanted to wait. They didn't take any action on this information right away. In 81, surveillance satellites show that Soviet warships, including a salvage vessel, anchored over the site of the tap, the initial tap had been installed. We dispatched one of the U.S. subs to recover the device, but the divers were unable to find it.
They'd already taken it, yeah.
And it was concluded that the Soviets had taken it. Now, as of 1999, that recording device was on public display at the Great Patriotic War Museum in Moscow.
Which is awesome.
Which I think is kind of awesome. It's like, look at this, look at this giant tape recorder that we found. How did this all come to light? In July of 85, there was a KGB colonel who was Pelton's initial contact in D.C. He defected to the United States and provided information that eventually led to Pelton's arrest. That story is also crazy bananas because he defected for a couple months and then got cold feet. I mean, he dumped a ton of information to us, a ton of validated information.
And then undefected.
And then undefected or redefected, depending on how you view it, but like defected from the U.S. to go back. And it's a fascinating story, but I won't tell it here. But this undersea operation may have never come to light had Pelton not disclosed it and not gotten caught.
And the great thing was in the museum, it says, look at the crazy thing the Americans made. It's nuclear powered. It's 20 feet long. It weighs a bazillion pounds. It took them a special submarine. We gave them a carving.
No, it is really the juxtaposition of that, right?
All right, we have to get out of here, but quickly before we do, have you seen or read anything good this last week?
Yes. Do you know who the bird was? I suspect you do.
The bird.
Give
me more information.
Mark the Bird Fidrych.
Pitcher?
pitcher. That is right. I figured you would know this. He was a professional baseball pitcher who played for the good old and potentially World Series winning Detroit Tigers.
Okay.
And he was there for 5 seasons. This guy was born in Massachusetts. He was drafted by the Tigers in the 10th round of the 1974 amateur draft, and he earned the nickname, arguably the best nickname you could give somebody, the Bird, from a coach in the minor leagues due to his resemblance to the Sesame Street character Big Bird.
Okay. He was a tall.
He had like
weird
curly
guy.
hair, kind of lanky. I could totally see him as Big Bird. And he had a very brief but super memorable career, most notably his rookie season in 1976, when his quirky antics on the mound, like talking to the ball and manicuring the pitcher's mound, which is still fun to watch to this day.
I remember that.
Yeah, made him a national sensation.
Oh, yeah.
That year, he led the major leagues with a 2.34 ERA, which I've been told is good.
It's crazy.
And a league-leading 24 complete games, finishing the season with a 19-9 record.
As a rookie. As a rookie.
For his performance, he was named the American League Rookie of the Year and was the runner-up for the Cy Young Award.
Amazing.
This guy was like the star of the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lovely Major League Baseball doc that I'll put in the show notes that talks about this. But for example, Sinatra, Frank, had a party and all he cared about being there was the Bird.
Sure.
And he just talked to the Bird the whole time. So this guy went from playing in the minor leagues to hanging out with Sinatra at Frank Sinatra's birthday party in the span of like weeks.
He got famous in one summer.
It was insane. So he was just this absolute juggernaut. Unfortunately, despite his success, his career was cut short by arm injuries. He played his last major league game in 1980 and retired from baseball a few years later. Unfortunately, he died in 2009 at the age of 54 when his clothes became entangled with the powered takeoff shaft on one of his trucks, and he was actually suffocated to death.
He had a trucking business. Yeah.
Terrible. But if you're a fan of Major League Baseball, of the Tigers, or even just of Detroit, I'd give MLB Network's The Bird a watch. I really enjoyed it. Hat tip to one of our listeners, Mr. Sean Phillips. Thank you, Sean. This was a great watch. I really enjoyed it. I thought you would too, because it's Major League Baseball.
100%. Cannot wait to watch this.
How about you? What you got?
I've got 1965's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, of course. A landmark of the spy genre. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold strips away the glamour of espionage, replacing it with a grim, cynical reality. The film follows Alec Leamas, a disillusioned British agent whose career seems to be over. But his apparent downfall is a ruse, a complex operation designed to take down a high-ranking East German official. Liam's journey is less a thrilling adventure and more a psychological descent into a world where loyalty is a trap and no one is who they seem. The final shocking moments at the Berlin Wall deliver a devastating statement on the human cost of the Cold War's shadowy games, solidifying the film as a bleak and brilliant masterpiece. Winner of 4 BAFTA awards, including Best British Film, the Best British Actor for Richard Burton, Best British Cinematography, and Best British Art Direction. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is available on MGM Plus right now.
This sounds super interesting.
Such a good movie.
And only 20 years after the end of World War II, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
The time that this came out, middle of the Cold War.
Richard Burton is ridiculously good in this movie.
Yeah, right. I'm going to watch this.
That is the episode.
Thank you for joining us for all this nonsense, a truly terrible podcast from The Awful Company. Visit us on the web at nonsense.productions. I'm Stu.
I'm Jeff Parker.
If you like this program, please follow, download, subscribe, and like at Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, AntennaPod, iHeartRadio, Spotify, my favorite Overcast, or wherever you may get your podcasts from.
Nonsense uses Signal Messenger. There's no such thing as secure messaging on software that's not open sourced. Signal, strongly encrypted open source messaging. Check it out.
You mean, wait, just saving notepad files as .txt and sending them back and forth doesn't?
No, that'll work. That's fine.
Oh, okay, good. Great. We'll be here every Tuesday and Thursday mornings for more nonsense. Please join us.
Did you like James Bond's films when you were a kid?
No, I loved them.
He had a license to kill.
Like, is there a test for that? Like, do you have like a learner's permit where you just kill a couple people and then
Or you just mildly injure people?
really maim them? How good is the eye test for the license to kill? Like,
So you don't miss and kill
so you
the
don't
wrong
miss,
guy.
right? I mean, I'm sure you got to be like 2010 or something. You can't be in there with like, oh, hold on. Oh, wait, his license to kill says needs corrective lenses on the bottom. I'm sorry, sir. You weren't wearing your glasses when you shot the villain. Your license has been revoked.
Come with me. You're going to prison for life.